April 28th, 9 o'clock. I heard this loud ruckus. I heard a loud voice bark out, FBI, come out with your hands up. Had 6 or 7 guns pointed right at me.
FBI, come out with your hands up!
Since January 6th, the Biden administration has launched the biggest and most technologically sophisticated manhunt in American history. They've described it as a shock and awe campaign against our own people.
And our office wanted to ensure that there was shock and awe, that we could charge as many people as possible.
Shock and awe sound familiar? It means that some of the same veterans who kicked in doors to find al-Qaeda terrorists are now having their doors kicked in by the same government that sent them to risk their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. Facial recognition software, online sentiment analysis tools, old-fashioned snitching, all of the Orwellian methods employed by the surveillance state in the war on terror, now used to track down and purge American war veterans, law enforcement officers, and any journalists who asked the wrong question. It took a decade for the federal government to find Osama bin Laden. They can find you a lot faster. They likely already have. According to reporting by The Intercept, the CIA is now funding 38 separate companies to identify and spy on social media posts whose opinions the Biden administration disagrees with. Once you're identified as a, quote, extremist, information about you winds up in a government database called Main Core. At this point, your life can change quickly. On April 28, 2021, federal agents launched a pre-dawn raid on the home of Paul and Marilyn Huper in Homer, Alaska. That's a small coastal village over 200 miles from Anchorage. This is what happened next.
Homer, Alaska. Tales from the end of the road. Highway 1 starts in Key West and ends in Homer. This is as far away as you can get from the lower 48, which is a lot of our goal.
We feel a lot more freedom here. Fishing and hunting, kayaking, bear viewing, and all of that. It's a great place to live, great community, about 10,000 people total. Ultra conservative to ultra liberal, and we get along, we make it work. Good people.
We have a very small property called Homer Inn and Spa.
We try to cultivate a space that has peace.
FBI!
That peace was shattered at around 9 o'clock in the morning when armed federal agents stormed their home. The Hupers are not international terrorists. They're not dangerous gang members. They're Trump voters. On January 6, 2021, they were in Washington at a peaceful, constitutionally protected political rally.
It really felt like it was a violation of our space, definitely, to have people barge in uninvited. You know, we gladly would have sat down and had a cup of tea with them and went, okay, what do you need? You don't have to tear my door down. You don't have to terrorize me with guns and handcuffs and all of that.
I turned around, they cuffed me with my hands behind my back and put me in a chair.
Initially, they would not present a search warrant.
And then we asked, what is this about?
What are you doing inside my house with guns and handcuffs?
It never occurred to me they would actually think we had anything to do with anything inside the Capitol, because we never made it inside the Capitol.
But we really just wanted our voices to be heard. We wanted to be a part of something historical. 1 million patriots all gathered together.
Let's do it. We'll be good Americans and we'll go to a rally.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building.
The call had been to go stand at the Capitol so they'd know we were watching the decisions they made.
And we managed to get lost on the way to the Capitol. There were police cars and riot control cars and all of that heading up Constitution Avenue.
But what we saw was tons of people hanging out, kind of wondering what's happening because there was no cell coverage. We were mentioning to some people like, hey, it looks like we missed the party. And they're like, oh no, you can go in. Just get in that line there, follow those people. See, they're heading on in and they're just letting anybody who wants in. And I was like, that doesn't sound right.
And sure enough, you could see kind of a line snaking up. There were no police stopping anybody at all. It was like an open invitation just to walk right into the Capitol. Didn't feel right. We chose not to.
It felt totally like some kind of setup was being made.
Their instincts were right. It was a setup.
I had been hearing that the FBI had been contacting people who had been at DC and that people had been feeling threatened and interrogated by them. But I definitely felt in threat of them hauling me away to somewhere in DC and me never coming out again. They wouldn't let us make a phone call. They refused to let me examine the warrant. And then the main agent who was questioning me, he said, we have footage of you all over the Capitol that day. And even inside Nancy Pelosi's office, they said, well, we're looking for Nancy Pelosi's laptop. We're here for Nancy Pelosi's laptop.
Of course, she didn't have it because she never went inside the Capitol building. They had the wrong person.
And then he showed me a photo, a distant fuzzy photo, profile of a woman in a hallway in the Capitol. And I was just like, is that who you think I am? Can we both see that this is two different people? He said, do you want me to put in my report that you lied to a federal agent, and grabbed the paper and left again and went back to searching. They took my laptop, and then they took a little tiny copy of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
This is how the government sees you.
Domestic violent extremism.
They seize my copy of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. They seize that as evidence against me. What is that saying?
Terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today.
If you got a copy of those rights, you're considered to be an extreme radical today.
We still may have charges coming down. Our house may be bugged.
Not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
I know a friend said there were a couple FBI agents taping my husband at the coffee shop, recording his phone conversations, and they challenged him and told him to leave. So they just make up evidence, or they make up cases. I mean, there's a history of that, especially with people who appear to be Trump supporters or with Trump himself. Trump tweeted once, they don't hate me, they hate you, I'm just in the way. Now, the real agenda of coming after the people is becoming more apparent.
Move! There are millions of Americans, almost all white, almost all Republicans, who need to be deprogrammed.
It is a purge aimed at legacy Americans.
How are we going to really almost deprogram these people who have signed up for the cult of Trump?
Purge of inconvenient citizens who vote the wrong way.
What someone on my team earlier today called de-Baathification.
In the first war on terror following the American invasion of Iraq, the so-called de-Baathification of Iraqi society began.
The hunt is on.
We occupied their capital.
Tonight in Washington, D.C., a green zone perimeter has been established.
We hunted down supporters of the former Iraqi regime.
The National Guard scouring for explosives and extremists.
We purged their military and their law enforcement agencies and all public supporters of the former regime.
The new Secretary of Defense ordered the entire U.S. military to, quote, stand down while investigators cleansed the ranks of political extremists.
We threatened to do the same to anyone we identified as part of the axis of evil.
Unholy alliance of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, even libertarians.
Nothing like this has ever taken place on American soil until now.
Legislators around the country have already begun attempting to weed out extremism within the ranks of law enforcement.
Fire, you're cold. No misses. That's why you need to get a girlfriend and get married. Then you'll have a missus.
A special agent for the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, is now facing criminal charges for his role on January 6th.
DEA agent Mark Ibrahim was forced from his job and later indicted simply because he was near the Capitol protests on January 6th.
It's crazy how quick they turn on the cops. It's not right. Everyone's just trying to do their job, man.
I truly believe that my calling is to be a protector of people who aren't trained or fit or able to protect themselves. I joined the DEA because I really believe that the Drug Enforcement Administration was the premier agency fighting the cartels. The cartels are the largest human traffickers in the world, and I wanted to fight that.
Mark's a dedicated, motivated guy.
Tim Clementi is an expert on counterterrorism.
He loves this country. His parents were immigrants, so he's a first generation. Mark wanted to honor the country that accepted his parents, and he did that by first serving in the military and then when he got into federal law enforcement. And I know Mark was down near the Capitol, and merely for having been there on that day and near the Capitol, Mark lost his job, lost his security clearance, and probably ended his years of service to the United States government and to the people of the United States because of that.
Ibrahim says he went to the Capitol that day because he was invited by an FBI informant, a man he had known in Iraq. We have confirmed this is true. We've reached out to that man, the man that Ibrahim went to the protest with. He denies he encouraged anyone to break the law, but that man did confirm that he has been an FBI informant. He confirmed the FBI knew he was at the Capitol that day, and he confirmed he invited Mark Ibrahim to the protest. Ibrahim says that the two of them stood outside the building. The FBI informant turned to him and strongly encouraged him to enter the Capitol building. Ibrahim knew that was illegal, so he refused to do it. Mark Ibrahim now faces 15 years in federal prison.
They labeled me a domestic terrorist. Like, I just want to see peace and unity, because I've seen it in foreign countries between Sunni and Shia, and open violence in the streets. It's a sad and scary thing. I'm afraid that if this division and dehumanizing continues, that's where America's headed, and I pray that never happens. I think how close America came to not existing at Valley Forge. George Washington got on his knees before God and asked him to give him wisdom and discernment. And I think America is in a very fragile state right now. And I think that we need to do what George Washington did, is get on our knees and pray.
In Iraq, during the first war on terror, the U.S. government tore down all vestiges of the previous regime and then reordered the society from the top to the bottom. First, our authorities targeted the people who had guns, law enforcement, and the military. And then they turned their attention to the minds of the entire population. At the time, they called these weapons of mass persuasion. Psychological warfare. It looks familiar now.
It's very concerning that military service members and law enforcement officers with badges and guns are a target for recruitment by these extremist groups.
Before I was a special agent, I was in information warfare.
The military has to do more to address extremism in its ranks.
Extremism in the military. And I think we're going to have to reset our entire intelligence approach.
Law enforcement agencies need a rebalancing, similar to what occurred after 9/11, when the counter-terror focus became Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
If you ask anybody in the asymmetrical warfare realm if we're at war, they will tell you without a doubt, yes.
The first insurrection of what I suspect will be many insurrections. We are dealing with an insurgency in the United States.
Influence and psychological warfare are the most powerful forces on the planet. I have seen this happening in the mainstream media being used on American citizens, and I can reverse engineer exactly what they're doing, and it's very dangerous and alarming to me as a professional in this trade. My name is Emily Grace Rainey. I was a captain with the Psychological Operations Group at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I am essentially a propagandist for a living.
This new terrorism advisory is not based on any actual threats or plots, but it says there's a rise in anti-government rhetoric.
A very broad range of political views.
A broad range of ideologically motivated actors.
The term extremism is being kept nebulous for a reason.
Some of it is opposition to COVID public health rules like mask and vaccine measures. Some calls for violent action are based on claims of election fraud or a belief that Donald Trump can be reinstated.
It's so that there is gray area and they can use the term as they like against the people that they like to use it against. Me, for example.
Fort Bragg is investigating a psychological operations officer who led a group of people from North Carolina to the rally in D.C. that led up to those deadly riots.
I went and I saw my commander-in-chief.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you.
At my nation's capital, took 100 of my friends, and they ostensibly ruined my career had I wanted to stay. They revoked my clearance. They denied me a commission in the reserves so that I could finish out to retirement. And then they put a gag order on me that lasted from January until now.
The job of the Department of Defense is to keep America safe from our enemies. But we can't do that if some of those enemies lie within our own ranks.
So that I could not tell you today what the world needs to hear.
So if you see someone putting something that's extremist out there, that's a fellow Marine, it's now your duty to report.
It cannot be overstated how dangerous targeting your political opponents is and purging them out of the one place where you are legally allowed to have a gun and use it, government-ordered use of weapons. The danger of that cannot be overstated.
Everyone here, all you freedom fighters, this is for you.
We want to warn you that what you're about to see may be distressing. You're looking at images the Pentagon and the Department of Homeland Security consider dangerous extremism. A mother playing with her young son at a park in violation of government COVID restrictions.
I didn't want to cause any major uproar, but I went to the park with my son Eli, who's 2, and we took down the caution tape and we played. Could not think of a more peaceful way to stand against what I saw as being overreach, and I was given an administrative reprimand for taking down the caution tape at the park.
Emily Rainey followed this up with yet another jarring display of extremism. As a private citizen, not in uniform, consistent with her constitutional rights, and in violation of no policy directive, she led a group of middle-aged American homeowners to a rally in support of election integrity.
Regardless of what you've heard, myself and 100 grandmas did not storm the Capitol. We did not see the inside. We didn't take a tour. It was said that I was the architect of the January 6th insurrection. It was said that I led 100 militia to the Capitol with weapons and military equipment. You know, the insinuations were like using my name in the same sentence as Timothy McVeigh. And then that's when the extremist rhetoric started happening. We started to see all of this stuff coming up about the veterans that were in the crowd.
Individuals who have received military training from the best military in the world, and then they turn around and use these very skills to attack the country.
As a psychological operations officer, we may or may not be interested in influencing an insurrection in other countries. If you were going to do that hypothetically, you wouldn't do that by telling a group of 1 million people to come to the Capitol, peaceably assemble, and just bring your American flags.
We can't be disrespectful.
So if that was an insurrection, it was the most poorly conducted insurrection ever.
If it wasn't an insurrection, then what was it?
Special Operations uses the military deception tactic of a false flag abroad against the enemies of America. A false flag is any time you want to frame another group so that you can then take action against that group. It is my opinion that false flags have happened in this country, one of which may have been January 6th.
And DHS says the coming 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks and religious holidays later this year could be catalysts for violence.
Fear is one of the biggest tactics used in psychological operations. So what we're seeing is fear being used to manipulate the military to see millions of Americans as domestic terrorists and to try to silence people. There is a fear that if you are a conservative and you're in the military, that you will be singled out, that you will be looked at with suspicion, that your clearance may be in question. I'm driving into work and I'm thinking, oh, I might be arrested at the gate. They're saying that I've committed treason and that I'm a domestic terrorist.
We may be witnessing the dawn of a sustained wave of violent insurgency within our own country.
So you're driving around Fort Bragg, you see NRA stickers, come and take it, Gaston flags, you see all of this. When they started to say that extremists were in the military and that those extremists had an interest in the spirit of 1776, you started seeing really poorly scratched out bumper stickers over all of Fort Bragg. You are slowly purging out of the military any dissenting voice that may actually stand in the way of using military improperly in the future. The last 20 years, we have been a country at war. Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. Now that those wars are winding down, there's this idea that the military needs to find a new mission. Their job is not to root out domestic extremism in the homeland. Be ready for that day when you are given an unlawful order per the Constitution.
I got a whole bunch of guys right there.
Where you take your rank off and you say, no, to hell with that. That's my prayer, is really for my own brothers and sisters in arms. Wake up.
The United States is in a state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and the foundations of this system.
There was an old interview with a Russian KGB defector named
Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov.
And he referred to people as useful idiots.
The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to.
You could show them the concentration camp, and they still won't believe.
The people in charge, they're literally declaring war on their own population. Here's the former CIA director describing what the enemy looks like.
And this threat from domestic violence extremists is much more challenging, I believe, than it was in terms of going after foreign terrorists.
The helicopters have left Afghanistan, and now they've landed here at home. They've begun to fight a new enemy in a new war on terror. Not, you should understand, a metaphorical war, but an actual war. Soldiers and paramilitary law enforcement, guided by the world's most powerful intelligence agencies, hunting down American citizens, purging them from society, throwing some of them into solitary confinement.
You are in a state of war, and you have precious little time to save yourself.